She thought he was just another face in the crowd, someone she could insult and dismiss without consequence. But when she shouted, "Go back to your country," he didn't yell, he didn't curse. He stepped forward and said something so powerful the entire café fell silent, and no one ever saw him the same way again. The café buzzed with the low hum of conversation, clinking mugs, and the occasional hiss of steamed milk. Sunlight spilled through the wide windows, painting golden lines across tile and tabletops. It was the kind of afternoon that felt ordinary, unremarkable, almost forgettable, until it wasn't. He stood near the counter, calm, patient. A tall black man, maybe in his late 30s, wearing a crisp button-down and worn leather satchel slung over one shoulder. He gave the barista a small nod as he ordered. "Large oat milk latte, please. No rush." His voice was soft, courteous, measured. Behind him, the mood shifted. Subtle at first, a shuffle of feet, an exasperated sigh. Then sharper. "Unbelievable," came a voice, sharp, cold, typical. He turned slightly, confused but not yet concerned. That's when she stepped forward, a white woman in designer sunglasses and a tight frown. "You just walked right in front of me," she snapped. "You people always think you're entitled to everything." He blinked. "Ma'am, I've been in line. I just spoke with the barista." "Oh, sure," she scoffed, voice rising. "Cut the line and then lie about it." The cafe's atmosphere began to shift. Conversations dimmed, heads turned. Even the espresso machine quieted, as if unwilling to interrupt what was coming. She squared her shoulders. "Go back to your country." The words cracked through the room like a dropped glass, sharp, shattering. The man didn't move. Not right away. He just stood there, hands loose at his sides, eyes fixed on her. No flinch. No anger. Just stillness. Someone near the window set down their cup. A young woman near the pastry case fumbled for her phone, thumb already hitting record. The barista froze mid-pour, latte art suspended in foam like a question mark. "Excuse me?" he said finally, his voice low. Not shaken, anchored. She doubled down. "You heard me. You don't belong here. People like you. Always playing the victim, taking advantage. It's disgusting." A murmur swept through the room. A couple by the door stood up. A teenager whispered something to his friend. No one interrupted. Not yet. He turned to face her fully now. Still no shouting. Still no rise. Just a steady look that held more power than volume ever could. That's when it shifted, from a complaint to a confrontation, from a bad attitude to a public reckoning. The camera lenses focused. The silence deepened. And in that pause, before he said another word, one truth became painfully clear. This wasn't the first time he'd heard those words. But it might be the last time she said them without consequence. He didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't raise his voice. He just turned, slowly, deliberately, until he was fully facing her. His hands remained at his sides, palms open, his expression unreadable but steady. "Excuse me?" he said. Not a challenge, not a threat. Just 3 words, soft but heavy with meaning. Like he wasn't asking her to repeat it. He was giving her a chance to reconsider. But she didn't. She took a step closer, as if volume could make her right. "You heard me," she snapped. "Go back to your country." Each word came sharper, clipped, like she was spitting them through clenched teeth. Her voice sliced through the air, and with it, the room fractured. A man near the register stopped mid-sip. A barista's hand hovered inches above a whipped cream canister. A little girl clutched her mother's arm. Phones were up now, silent witnesses, blinking red circles of record buttons watching it unfold. Still, he didn't move. Didn't meet fire with fire. Didn't give her what she wanted. He stood rooted, centered, like the eye of a storm refusing to spin. The woman's face twisted, not just with anger, but confusion, as if she expected yelling, defensiveness, something loud. Instead, she got stillness, and it unsettled her. "I work hard," she hissed, voice trembling with fury. "I pay taxes. I belong here. People like you." He raised one hand gently, not to interrupt, just to pause the unraveling. "I was born in Chicago," he said, voice level. "Lived here all my life." She blinked, flinched, but only for a second. "That doesn't matter," she muttered. "It's not about where you were born, it's about who you are." The words hung there, ugly, heavy. No one spoke, not yet. But you could feel the air shifting, tightening around her, around him. The man looked at her, not with hate, not even pity, just knowing. Like he'd met her before. Not her exactly, but this energy, this prejudice wrapped in patriotism, this fury dressed up as fear. He glanced briefly toward the staff behind the counter. They stood frozen, young, unsure, afraid to get involved. But their eyes were wide, faces pale. They'd heard it too. Every word. Then, slowly, he turned back to her. "I belong here," he said quietly. "Maybe more than you realize." His voice was calm, but the words landed like thunder. Not because they were loud, but because they were true. The woman stared at him, lips pressed into a thin, colorless line. But she didn't speak. Not this time. And still, he didn't move. He didn't shout. He didn't walk away. He stood there, holding the weight of her hate without letting it change him. And in that stillness, the crowd began to shift. Not away from him, but around him. He stepped forward. Not fast, not aggressive. Just enough to close the space between them. Enough to make his presence undeniable. The woman stiffened. She'd expected retreat. Or rage. Instead, she got resolve. "Which country do you mean?" he asked, voice even. "The one where I was born?" He didn't wait for her answer. "Or the one where my grandfather bled in uniform, across an ocean under fire? So you could stand in this café and speak freely, even if it's to say something like that?" The silence cracked. A quiet gasp near the back. A barista's hand slowly lowering the milk pitcher. One man muttered, "Damn," under his breath. Not with contempt. With awe. The woman opened her mouth, but no words came. Her lips moved, but whatever script she'd been working from no longer fit the moment. "My father," he continued, "was a firefighter. 32 years. Ran into burning homes to save strangers who never asked where he was from. They just called him when they needed help." Someone near the front lowered their phone, eyes wide. Recording, yes, but now just watching. "And me?" he said. "I teach civics at Jefferson High. I've been shaping young minds, kids who look like me and kids who look like you, for over a decade. I've taught them about freedom, about speech, about responsibility." He wasn't reciting a resume. He was peeling back the layers of her assumptions, calmly, carefully, like someone folding a flag. "You told me to go back," he said, quieter now. "But I never left." Her face reddened. Not with righteousness anymore, but with something else. A realization, or maybe fear. Not of him, but of what she just revealed about herself, in front of a room full of people who no longer saw her the same. "You think you know who I am," he added, "because of the color of my skin, because I stood in front of you in line. But you don't know me. You don't know my story. You didn't ask." He paused, let it sit. Then, "You just assumed." The woman looked around now, searching the café for some kind of backup. But the faces she found weren't with her. They were turned toward him, quiet, watching, listening. Not because he was loud, but because he was right. He stepped back slightly, not retreating, just making room for the truth to breathe. "This is my country," he said, "and I'm not going anywhere. Nothing more. No gloating. No grand gesture. Just that." And somehow it was louder than anything she'd said. She opened her mouth again. But the words caught. Somewhere between her throat and the fear now creeping behind her eyes. Whatever conviction had lit her earlier was flickering fast, like a match burning too close to the fingers that struck it. "I didn't mean," she started, but even she didn't believe it. He didn't step in, didn't interrupt. He just waited, steady and still, like someone who'd had this conversation too many times to rush it. "You did," he said gently. "You meant it enough to say it out loud, in public, to a stranger." His tone wasn't cruel. It wasn't even angry. That's what made it land so hard. He wasn't trying to win. He was just telling the truth. "I've been told to go back more times than I can count," he continued, voice clear. "But I've got 4 generations buried in this soil. My great-grandfather helped build the railroads. My grandfather came back from war and wasn't allowed to buy a home with the GI Bill. My mother cleaned office buildings so I could go to college." He paused, eyes never leaving hers. "Where exactly do you think I should go?" She looked down for a second, blinked hard. But it wasn't just embarrassment. It was something deeper. That disorientation when the script you rehearsed in your head doesn't match the scene playing out in front of you. "I've never been arrested," he added. "Never even had a speeding ticket. I vote in every election. I mentor kids after school. I volunteer at the food pantry downtown." No one else in the cafe moved. It was as if the whole room had taken a single, collective breath and forgotten how to exhale. "I don't say all that to impress you," he said. "I say it because someone like you decided, just by looking at me, that I didn't belong." She looked around again, toward the crowd that once felt like her silent ally. But now, they weren't nodding. They weren't murmuring in agreement. They were watching her the way you watch a story fall apart. And in that moment, she wasn't the one in charge. She wasn't the one with the voice. He was. "I've worked my whole life to make this place better," he said. "For me, for my neighbors, even for you." And somehow that landed with more weight than any insult ever could, because he didn't shout her down. He didn't push her out. He simply reminded her, gently, devastatingly, that she was the one who didn't fit here. Not because of her skin, but because of what she chose to carry inside it. It started small, a single nod from the barista. Barely a movement, but full of weight. Then a quiet sniff from the older man near the corner table, the one who had watched everything, hands folded, eyes glassy. He reached up and wiped beneath his glasses with the back of his hand. Then, from the back of the room, came one pair of hands, clapping, slow, measured, not sarcastic, not performative, just true. Another followed, then another, until the sound spread, gentle, rising, human. It wasn't loud. It wasn't wild. It didn't need to be. It carried more than noise ever could. It carried acknowledgement. He didn't bow, didn't smile, just stood there, hands still at his sides, like a man who had said what needed saying and didn't expect anything in return. The woman stiffened. Her eyes darted to the clapping crowd, searching for someone, anyone to side with her. But the room had shifted. The support she thought was waiting behind her had vanished. Or maybe it was never there to begin with. She muttered something under her breath. No one asked her to repeat it. No one cared. She grabbed her purse with a sharp tug and turned toward the door. The sound of her heels on the tile rang louder than the applause. She pushed the door open hard enough to make the chimes jangle. No one stopped her. No one followed, and that said more than any argument could. The door swung shut behind her with a final clink. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was clean, like the air had cleared, and everyone could finally breathe again. The man exhaled slowly, his first real breath since the moment began. A teenage girl stepped forward, awkward but brave. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for how you handled that." He gave a small nod, nothing more. "Sometimes silence isn't enough," he replied. "Sometimes you have to name it." The barista placed his drink on the counter, no charge, just a quiet gesture, and said, "That was something." The man nodded again, took the cup and looked around the cafe. Not for recognition. Just to remember. The faces, the moment, the shift. Not victory, truth. That's what they'd all witnessed. Not a takedown, not a viral moment, but a quiet reckoning. The kind that doesn't end with applause, but begins with it. He didn't linger. Just turned, walked to the corner table, and sat down. Opened a book. took a sip, and the café slowly returned to motion. But the air wasn't the same. Neither were the people in it. The sun had dipped low by late afternoon, casting long shadows across the park. Leaves rustled quietly above him as he sat on the worn wooden bench, coffee cup now half empty, the steam long gone. Birds chirped lazily. Joggers passed. Children laughed in the distance. Life moved on, unaware, or maybe unwilling, to hold on to moments like the one from earlier. He sat still, watching the breeze stir the grass. Not replaying the scene, not seeking meaning, just letting the quiet settle. For the first time all day, no eyes were on him. No cameras. No tension. Just the sound of wind and the rhythm of breath. Then a voice broke through, small but clear. "Was that you at the cafe?" He turned. A boy, maybe 11, maybe 12, stood a few feet away. Hoodie too big, backpack slung low, curiosity in his eyes. Not fear, not judgment, just the kind of honest awe kids haven't learned to hide yet. The man nodded once. The boy stepped closer. "You were brave." He smiled gently, as if the word didn't quite fit. He looked down at the cup in his hand, then back at the boy. "I wasn't brave," he said softly. "I was just tired." The boy's brow furrowed. "Tired of what?" "Of being silent," the man answered. "Of pretending it doesn't sting. Of letting people speak hate like it's normal and walking away like it didn't happen." The boy didn't say anything, just sat on the edge of the bench beside him, backpack still on. "For a long time," the man continued, "I thought staying calm meant staying quiet. I thought if I didn't respond, it would make me stronger. But silence isn't strength, it's weight. And after a while, it gets too heavy." The boy nodded slowly, like he was trying to understand something too big for words. The man looked at him. "You ever been made to feel like you don't belong?" The boy shrugged. But it wasn't casual. It was careful. "Sometimes," he said. "At school." The man nodded. "Then you already know. It's not just what they say. It's how they say it. Like they've decided who you are before you even speak." The boy looked down, tracing his sneaker across the dirt. "But you didn't yell," he said. "You just talked." "Talking can be loud," the man replied, "if you say the right things." The boy was quiet for a moment. Then, "I want to be like that." The man smiled again, this time deeper. "You already are," he said. They sat there a while longer. 2 generations. 2 strangers. 1 truth. That strength doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like stillness, like clarity, like knowing who you are, and refusing to let anyone take that from you. By nightfall, the video had already circled the city. It wasn't flashy, no shouting match, no wild confrontation, just grainy phone footage of a man standing still, speaking calm truths to a woman unraveling in her own assumptions. But it struck something deep, something that didn't need edits or effects. Because it was real. It spread fast, first in group chats, then on timelines, then newsrooms. Man confronts racist tirade with quiet strength. Grace under fire. The response that silenced a room. Comment sections filled with words like dignity, power, poise. People shared it not because it was dramatic, but because it was different. No yelling, no chaos. Just restraint in a moment that could have gone any other way. He didn't post it, didn't comment. When reporters reached out, he declined. "I said what I needed to," he told one politely. "The message is there. It doesn't need me explaining it." He wasn't interested in headlines, or followers, or the sudden swarm of attention. Because for him, it had never been about being seen. It was about being heard. Across the city, the ripple effect began. In classrooms, teachers played the clip. Not for shock, but as a lesson. In offices, co-workers talked about what it meant to truly belong. Even in that same cafe, someone wrote a note on the chalkboard near the counter. "This is a space for respect. Period." No names were mentioned, no formal statements released. But something shifted. A man who had every right to rage had chosen something harder. He had chosen grace. And that choice, so simple, so firm, echoed louder than outrage ever could. A week later, the cafe was still busy. People still ordered lattes, still typed on laptops, still came and went. But every so often someone would glance at that corner table, the one by the window, the one where he'd sat after it all. And for a second the noise would dim, just a little, because they remembered. Not the woman's words, not her anger, but his stillness, his voice, his belonging. And in a world that too often confuses volume with power, he reminded them all. The strongest stand doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it just refuses to move.